Aloha, bonjour, and welcome to a side event at the 48th session of the UN Human Rights Council. So far, the UN Human Rights Council has began with many new advancements that are very important to people around the planet. One of the most important ones is looking at the right to a clean, safe, healthy, and sustainable environment. Many places in the world, this will mean so much with that global recognition. Nowhere more than in Laos. Today, we'll be looking at some of the most important issues inside Laos that relate to another theme that comes up at the September session of the Human Rights Council every year. That is the UN Sustainable Development Goals and human rights. Of course, many of those sustainable development goals are very important to the people in Laos today. What is so exciting about the panel that we'll be having today is this panel will be speaking about the UN SDGs and human rights in Laos right after the most recent voluntary national review that just took place this summer at the high-level political forum. Today, it's an honor for me to welcome the panel that will look at many of the sustainable development goals, but of course, most importantly, SDG 16 on peace, justice, and strong institutions. SDG 16, of course, is imperative because if people have faith in their governance and are able to have their voice heard, then we know that is the only way we'll be able to fully achieve the 2030 agenda and be successful to ensure that self-determination and sustainable development are able to be achieved around the world. It is my honor today, as we're gathered here in Geneva, to welcome Dr. Bounthone Chanthalavong Wiese. She will begin today and be our first speaker. Bounthone, thank you so much for joining us and look forward to hearing your perspective, because we know that the new kind of human rights violations that are taking place in Southeast Asia, consisting of land grabbings, dam disasters, have a huge, deep impact for the people in the Mekong region that will really overshadow the idea of achieving the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030. We know land rights and emerging economies that focus much more on exchange. Exchange in pursuit of equality and equity are the way forward instead of the model of extraction that has taken place for too long, depriving the Lao people of their basic dignity and their demands for a better future. Bounthone, thank you for joining us today.
Okay, thank you, Joshua. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Dr. Bounthone Chanthalavong Wiese. I am the president of the Alliance for Democracy in Laos. My focus of my speech will be about SDG 1, 2, and 16 in relation with the human rights situation in Laos. Despite enormous natural resources and raw materials deposits in Laos, the country is still one of the poorest in the world. The profits from the use of these resources flow mainly into foreign countries and into the hands of a few powerful people in Laos. But more than a quarter of the population is poor. In addition, the COVID-19 pandemic has made the situation much more badly. The main reasons for this are landcrafts and mega projects like the dams. No one of these projects had made any success for the people, nor gave them an employment place. About 45% of the land area in Laos today is nourished by foreign investors, without access for the Lao people. Another reason is the chronic corruption, which is not combated by the government. International aid is still a victim of the corruption. Most of this aid didn't reach the people. I will show you my presentation. You can see here some pictures about poverty, corruption, and landcraft in Laos. This one, you can see how can the Lao people live in Laos now. They don't have water, they don't have land. The system with not independent power in a one-party system is not able for a change or reform. The people are no participation in ruling power. The Lao People's Revolutionary Party has the own power in the country. Since the government is more dependent from Vietnam and China, the Chinese and Vietnamese people has more right in Laos than our people. Most of the Laotians feel this justice. The government has signed the UN Declaration of Human Rights, but it is not implemented in the country. This is similar to other international standards, where this government is not able to take into action. Laos is a country without any freedom. There is no freedom of assembly, no freedom of association except the communist organization, and no freedom of expression in every form. You can see now. In the last year, the freedom of expression has been more restricted by some decree to control in the internet, especially the social medias, so similar to the case of the three internet bloggers, Lord Chanthalavong, Somphon Phimmasone, and Sukanchaitat in 2016 was particularly explored here. Somphon Phimmasone was sentenced to a 20-year term, while Sukanchaitat was sentenced to 16 years. Lord Chanthalavong was handed a 12-year sentence. You can see this picture. Another well-known case in the Laos is this death of Miss Nguyen Hương Sanyabuli, better known by her name, nickname Mui. In November 2019, she was sentenced to 5 years in prison and a fine of equivalent of $2,280 to violating Article 117. You can see her picture now. Time and again, human rights activists disappear or are murdered in Laos. The case of Sanyabong, a Lao democracy activist, is peculiarly mysterious. He disappeared in Thailand in 2019 under previously unexplained circumstance. This is her, you can see his picture. Sombat Somphon disappears on December 15, 2012. The officers still denies any knowledge about the ongoing of this case. Instead of allow an independent investigation, they publish conspiracy theories. You can see this picture from Sompat Sompon. In August 2020, the human rights activist Puvong Sanyaseng was found shot dead on the edge of a country road about 13 kilometers from his home. The village of Tassin in Borikamsai province. The authorities have not started by any investigation and have forbidden the relatives and friends of the human rights activists to speak about this case. You can see his picture here. Land grabbing. On July 2017, gave instincts to one scenario where illegal land grabbing occurred in the district Banjup city Tadeng, province Mekong. 14 people were arrested by Lao authorities. You can see this picture. The authorities of Laos have arrested the people in an imprudent and inequitable manner. The people have only defended their right to reside on their lawful property. 2 minors under 18 years was also arrested without due process. The traumatic torture and condition of detention without judicial justification are by no means justified. In 2020, in Northwest Laos, in Udomsai province, 500 families were not given a quarter compensation after the being forcibly relocated for a Chinese rain project. According to official information, around 4,400 families in Laos are affected by the project. The citizens in Laos barely dare to stand up for their rights. As a reason, the rule of law of the country is in danger. Decree number 238 prevented the work of NGOs in Laos. Our recommendations are: 1. Stop the land grab and the mega projects immediately. 2. International standard of governance, justice, and basic freedom have to be implemented. 3. The UN Declaration of Human Rights must finally be implemented. 4. Violation of international treaties and agreement must be sanctioned more strongly by the UN. If the human rights standards are violated, aid payment must be cancelled. Five, Laos urgently needs a separation of power. The judiciary, executive, and legislative branches must be able to act independently of one another. For this reason, the sole claim of power of the People's Revolutionary Party of Laos must also be deleted. 6. Only a fundamental democratic form for multi-party system can save the catastrophic state of the Lao nation. 7. Separation of power as well as more freedom of the press and freedom of expression. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bounthone Chanthalavong Wiese. That was an excellent summary of the situation and really speaking truth to power, sharing what's at stake regarding the Sustainable Development Goals and why they're so significant in the daily lives of the people of Laos. We know that if these basic Sustainable Development Goals cannot be achieved, that then the future of the nation is at stake. but we really appreciate you sharing the linkages with human rights, and that we see the challenge with SDG 16 being achieved because the activists, the advocates are demanding a true democracy that, of course, they have to have SDG 16 because these are the tools then to be able to make all of the others happen. The people want to end poverty. The people want to guarantee no more hunger. The people want to have health and well-being. But until they're heard in their daily deliberations at the government level in policy that matters to people, this will not be the case. And we are also reminded in a very sad way, especially as the UN focused on enforced disappearances last month, that we're nearing a decade long, that one of the people who cared the most about sustainable development, even before the Sustainable Development Goals were adopted by the UN, Sombath Somphone, has almost been disappeared for a decade. This was the best hope for Laos of a model that works with the people to make sure that they are able to be in charge and, more importantly, create policies and practices rooted in the rich Lao culture. So thank you so much. We'll now move to a dear colleague, Peng Sacksady, or as I know, Rodney, and he'll be joining us live from Canberra. Rodney, thank you so much, and we look forward to hearing your contribution.
Thank you, Dr. Joshua Cooper. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening from Australia. My name is Ronnie Peng Sacksady, chapter of the Alliance for Democracy in Laos from Australia. My introduction to my speech will cover SDG 8, 10, and 17. My introduction to my speech begins: poverty, inequalities, poor education system, poor healthcare system, poor welfare system, plenty of corruption and bribery are the fate of the Lao people under the Lao communist one-party Marxism, Leninism state controlled by the Indochina Communist Party embedded in the Lao People's Revolutionary Party set up by Ho Chi Minh since 1969. SDG 8, decent work and economic growth. Let me give simple example. The economic growth set by the UN per capita to exceed 7% by 2030. Report by the Lao government, quote, decorative and fake. From 2001 to 2020, the average annual rate of 11.86%. From $325 to 2,626 US dollar. World Statistics report 84.40% earn less than 5.5 US dollar per day. 2020 population in Laos is 7,275,560 in total. Now, from that, 84% would be around 6,140,572 people. And the rest, 25.6% would be 1,134,987. The bilateral cooperation with the communist states, with Vietnam since 1975, and with China since 1988, of turning natural resources into capital, by the so-called the socialist economic system in the dams construction, in mining, and in the acquisition of national lands for special economic zones, promote very little in employment and decent work according to the sustainability development goals set up by the United Nations. But the impact are colossal, which my colleague from Canada will explain about that. Mr. Kambane Anonthisen will explain about that. With the impact. SDG 10, reduce inequalities. Before and after the seizure of power by the Lao communists on the 2nd of December 1975 to declare a communist state as the Lao People's Democratic Republic, hundreds of thousands of Vietnamese troops with and without uniform up until now are stationed inside Laos in the workforce, claiming earnings from Laos government officials and expertise. The number could be as big as the 25.60% of the rest of the poor Lao people to 1,134,987 with good or better earnings among Lao population. The Chinese are coming to towns equipped with the leader Xi Jinping's idea of one belt, one road, or the Silk Road initiative, and the death threats diplomacy like Bounthone-Vientiane railway of 414 kilometers long, which gives the Lao government of $6.8 billion in debt and no decent work for the amount of money spent. The inequalities of the Lao people within and among the countries with China and Vietnam, including own foreign investors, oppress the country with debts, poverty, and crime. The culture of corruption in Lao PDR government to be as big as 14.40%, 2019 estimate, annually added more problems in eliminating poverty in the country. To allow the Golden Triangle Casino, King's Romance Casino in Bokeo province in northern Laos, owned by Zhao Wei, to operate inside Laos is a crime. The United States Treasury Department imposed sanctions on Zhao Wei transnational criminal organization, Zhao Wei TCO, in 2018 for its involvement in illegal activities, including money laundering, human trafficking, bribery, wildlife trafficking, and other forms of transnational organized crimes. Inequalities reduction 0. SDG 17, partnership for the goal. The Lao PDR government is heading in the wrong direction in promoting the wrong economic management system to solve the problem in achieving the sustainability development goals. Lao people must be aware of their problem and their involvement in the national security, transparency, and accountability of national economy. The partnership of the national management in association with international assistance and cooperation is very important. So far, the Lao PDR government is in criminal operations of corruption of the nation's wealth for their own wealth, including their bureaucrats, hand in hand with their allies, Vietnam and China. invasion of crimes. We, the Alliance for Democracy in Laos, after the decoding of the Communist Lao PDR, protest and urge UN and international countries for Laos to change and become a more democratic government formed with multiple parties in government before Laos disappear from this earth. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you so much, Peng. We appreciate your perspectives for many points. First and foremost, development and sustainable development is imperative if we're going to ever achieve the Paris Agreement and also to ensure the 2030 agenda. The model that exists today and the one that's being executed throughout Laos is actually one more example of extraction and exploitation of the local indigenous peoples. This must change. And this is why, once again, SDG 16, the people's voice must be heard. And we thank you so much for speaking up on their behalf and highlighting the conditions and circumstances that people are facing inside Laos due to this Belt Road Initiative that unfortunately is not reducing carbon, is not having the best people's interest at heart, but actually just to indebt and actually take out the resources that are so valuable to the people. And then of course, proposing new projects such as trains that is only to make sure that they can bring the resources of the country out faster and not to ensure that the people could even be able to get around. It's not the SDG 9 of industry and innovation and infrastructure that is needed. In fact, it is the action that's actually impoverishing the people more. Another example, of course, is this is not SDG 7 of clean energy and renewable energy. We see what's happening with these dams with people being displaced from their traditional homeland. So we thank you so much for sharing that. We now go to Bounthhom Chantha, and we thank him so much for being with us today.
Thank you, Dr. Cooper. Good afternoon, everyone, ladies and gentlemen. I am Bounthhom Chantha, Vice President of Alliance for Democracy in Laos, French chapter. You know, Dr. Cooper, as they are saying, the SDG and human rights are two sides of the same coin. And today, I'm gonna talk about SDG 9, 11, and 12 in Lao PDR. 6 years have been passed since the SDG is building on the principle of leaving no one behind. You know, for me, it's a resounding principle and more than ever important. The pandemic COVID-19 remains today because it undermines everything: justice, human rights, equality, and development. The SDG 9 based on 3 interconnected pillars, namely infrastructure, industrialization, and innovation, are key drivers of economic growth and social value creation to lift community out of poverty and give access to jobs, creating opportunity to make their living sustainable. Lao people should have a right of this, but when you look closely at this point in Lao PDR, it should be recalled that traffic infrastructure deficient with road in poor condition, only 9,673.5 kilometers are paved out of 21,716 kilometers. The ADL repeatedly received testimony from members in Laos that funds planned to construction of road have been embezzled for other projects. During the monsoon, if you can see in the picture now, when the rain falls, you can see impossible path. Vehicles are sticking up to the axle in the mud, and sometimes truck block the road 4 days until they are excavated. Farmers have difficulty getting to the market and administrative center. The economy is almost paralyzed. Children cannot go to school. Women giving birth at home, taking the risk of losing the life of the child. And now, Lao government touted his leading project, the railway construction with a so-called high-speed train connecting Vientiane to Sichuan, the Chinese province of Yunnan, with 530 kilometers length. The cost of the railway put Laos PDR in an enormous debt and environmental and social impacts. There are reports that the railway construction has pushed people off of their land without compensation, plus displacement of families estimated over 4,400. In my opinion, Lao people do not deserve this. Lao one-party state has tolerated any dissent. And when you issue the criticism, you put your life in jeopardy. And now, let's move to the next SDG 11, with the two crucial pillars, namely sustainable cities and communities. As described in SDG 9, the lack of infrastructure and the misplanning still hinders many communities in Laos. And now, urbanization is an emerging issue with a number of problems such as higher population growth, migrant workers, children protection, malnutrition of children among urban families, also pollution, diseases, and sanitary conditions. One figure to know, in 2020, the share of the population living in urban areas was approximately 26.6%. This was increased from 2011, approximately 30.6% was living in urban areas. The proportion is expected to rise more than a third of the total population over the next few years, Obviously, most migratory flow go from city to town, mainly to the capital Vientiane for seeking work and better life. Unfortunately, a very different problem arises, such as the amount of waste to be treated because of displacement of the local product without packaging and the product from abroad, as well as the settlement of Chinese in Laos. The Lao government did not have capacity to deal with the garbage management ever since. This is leading now to increased littering of the landscape. Urban sanitary is general poor, lack of adequate drainage and sewer system. Unpurified industrial wastewater additionally endanger drinking water. According to the World Bank, Laos PDR need to invest $20 million annually for water sanitation. But as well, a critical concern in Laos that I would like to point out here is youth unemployment. Therefore, there are a lot of young people crossing the border to Thailand looking for a job to make a living and be at the same time the main breadwinner for the whole family remaining in the country. Unfortunately, the pandemic COVID-19 undermined their own chance because they are forced to get back home due to sanitary crisis and job loss. Now moving to SDG 12. As you know, this is about responsible consumption and production patterns. It means to ensure good use of resources. On this point, I would say that the development plan of Lao government is only focused on mega project and special economic zone, especially for investors from China for some reason, but any benefit for the population. On mega project and special, the local residents are possibly relocated and replaced even by settlers from China. We have to assume that about 30% of the land of Laos and maybe more belong to foreign investors. Land that offers to the Laotian is mostly of inferior quality. Okay. The population is finding it increasingly difficult to manufacture their own product and ensure their own economic independence. The domestic market is increasingly flooded with products from China and Vietnam. Local products are mainly present in the agricultural sector. A serious concern overlooked in Laos is bananas plantation owned by Chinese firms, causing health and environmental problems, for instance, poisoning soil and water, workers falling ill after being exposed to dangerous chemicals, pesticide, for example. 7 main regions affected by this are not part of the country: Phung Sali, Luang Nam Tha, Bo Keo, Udom Sai, Luang Prabang, Senyaburi, Vientiane. For example, the illness, Dixie spell, blood in the urine, facial numbness, etc., and headache. In 2017, the Lao government ordered the closure, but the ban has been lifted 1 year later. According to the Asian Today magazine, bananas plantation were and remain a major health and environmental scourge. In conclusion, I would like to send out the message to Human Rights Council to have the follow-up and review processes and mechanisms that will monitor international aid and implementation in Lao PDR to apply pressure to current government to reform the governance system to a democratic system based on freedom of on kind, because lack of this hurt people and create obstacle for development. If not, what we did and what we will do will be much ado about nothing. Thank you, Dr. Cooper. To you.
Thank you so much. We appreciate the way that you express the interlinkages of all the SDGs, the lack of quality education leading people to be willing to accept these drastic development projects that only increase the inability for people to be able to determine the future in their community, to allow large foreign-owned corporations to come in and actually even impoverish the people deeper and not be allowed to be able to pursue what they hope for the future direction of the nation. We also appreciate you sharing the impacts of those monocrop plantations, looking at banana and other aspects, and also the health impact. We know now how health, well-being and health is so crucial, and how many people, of course, are not able to guarantee the highest standard of physical and mental health. And this was some of the issues that was brought up when the UN Special Rapporteur on Extreme Poverty and Human Rights, Philip Alston, visited Laos. He pointed out and made some of the points that you shared with us today, that it's actually the policies that are implemented today that are denying the potential for people to achieve a stronger society, that it's not something you can blame only on history, but more importantly, it's being perpetuated daily and worsened by those policies. We'll now move on to our next speaker, Kambane Anonthisen. We thank you so much for joining us from Canada, and we look forward to hearing your perspective. We also know it's great to hear from Canada as they're introducing many new policy measures to hold their corporations accountable when operating in other countries. Thank you so much.
Good morning, Dr. Joshua Cooper. And good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Kambane Anonthisen, the President of Alliance for Democracy in Laos, chapter of Canada. I'm going to talk about SDG number 7 and number 13 and the human rights violation in Laos. First, I will talk about the hydroelectric dam project, and at number 7 SDG, and number 13 SDG is about deforestation and mining project. First, I will talk about the SDG number 7. Lao PDR government has allowed the foreign investors, mainly from China, Vietnam, and Thailand, to build the hydroelectric dam up to 100 dams by the year 2030. According to a report by the Ministry of Energy and Mines on December 2019, there are 73 hydropower plants in operation in Laos, and 27 more dams are still under construction across the country. There are too many dams in Laos PDR. On July 23rd, 2021, Sept Dam collapsed. In Attapeu province, 19 villages were flooded. The report said that more than 13,000 villagers have been affected. Hundreds were missing and 40 dead. The dams destroyed the nature and lives. The dams make only benefits to foreign investors and Lao government officials from corruption. More electric dams, but the price of the electricity is so high. The dams make the ordinary Lao people no place to live and no land for farming. They are poorer and poorer. Next will be the SDG number 13, deforestation. In the past few years, the international NGOs repeatedly reported about illegal logging in Laos. Some time ago, the EIA, based in London, wrote a particularly revealing report about the rainforest in Laos. It disappeared at an alarming rate. The independent experts fear that there will soon be no more forests in Laos. Not only EIA, but also the Global Witness has been investigated in recent years that the Vietnamese companies are involved in the deforestation, which is concentrated in the east and south area of Laos. The companies of Vietnamese HAGL group are primarily responsible for overexploitation. Next, I'm going to talk about the mining. SDG number 13 too. The historic records USGS Lao PDR has 208 identified mines in digging. The most commonly listed primarily commodified in Laos mines are gold, lead, and copper. Laos has 4 prospect mines and 223 mines in production at the time the data was entered into USGS records. The gold mining in operation are Phu Sepon, Phu Bia, Phu Kham, and Atapu gold mines. A lot of gold are produced every day from these mines, but Lao ordinary people are still poor, and Lao PDR government have a lot of debts. Mining in Laos also destroy the nature and life. The toxic chemical waste from mining plants poison the fish, animals, and human beings. My recommendation to the Lao PDR government are: first, if Lao government would like to continue mining, they should find a way how to help Lao population to have good living and reduce the debts and keep the environment clean. Second, they should keep the toxic chemical waste in safe place and safe container. Third, they should stop allowing Vietnamese companies destroy the rainforest in Laos. Fourth, Lao government should stop allowing foreign companies to build the dams. And the last one, I would like to ask, why Mekong River Commission and the International River Commission cannot stop the Lao PDR government not to build the dams in Laos? Thank you, Mr. Dr. Jora Cooper.
Thank you so much for sharing the update about what's happening, but also the ability for people to stand up for what is important. We now will move to our last speaker, Khamphene Souvannasane. Khamphene, are you there? We know you should have.
I think campaign is she come later.
Oh, we thought she was going to join 5
Yes.
minutes before.
Yes.
Okay, well, we have one final speaker, but I would just like to begin to thank everyone for really going out and providing examples of each of the SDGs of no poverty, zero hunger, good health and well-being. I mean, quality education, gender justice. When you see what's going on, we know that the women of Laos must be encouraged to be part of the decision-making process, and that we see, more importantly, that whenever women stand up for a better future for Laos, unfortunately, they are then persecuted by the government and end up getting very long sentences that then violate their basic rights, but also deter many more people from standing up. And that's why it's so great to see you, the diaspora, demanding dignity for all in Laos, but also democracy for the greater good, that would have a model of governance that would allow for greater participation and make sure then that everyone would have, as you pointed out in the last speech, clean water. If you don't have the clean water, it's absolutely impossible to have the most basic essentials to be able to begin to make sure society is providing for its people. The renewable energy, we know that the government claims to be the battery of Southeast Asia, but the truth is there are so many renewable energy models that exist that Laos could be utilizing to then make sure that the people actually have what they need to be able to survive. And of course, decent work and economic growth. There are too few opportunities that allow the people of Laos to be able to earn a living while also maintaining their dignity. So many, of course, are forced to flee and become economic refugees in Thailand and neighboring countries. And then, of course, are held by a policy that they must come and renew their documents, which then become a place where they're then trapped and arrested, and then, of course, never able to return again. And of course, they're the main livelihood for their family. Number 9, it's definitely the industry and the infrastructure that's being done today is not one of a sustainable nature. It's also not even one based on the interest of the people of Laos. It's foreign companies that have desires to really take the resources, as was brought up, the copper, the gold, and there's no prosperity that then is able to be accomplished by the people of Laos. Then, of course, reducing inequalities. Number 10, the Sustainable Development Goal 10, that is unfortunately moving in the wrong direction. There's ever increasing gap between the wealthy elite who have accepted leadership from China and Vietnam and left the everyday people out of the equation to be able to determine the future for the nation. Then, of course, cities and communities, sustainable cities and communities. The people of Laos are quite sustainable, and the models that Sombath Somphone was introducing are extremely powerful. In fact, he was educating youth so they could actually be able to have sustainable development rooted in their own cultural practices, not a foreign model being imposed from outside, but what he had learned growing up, rooted in the indigenous wisdom of the people of Laos. And then, of course, if you go to sustainable consumption, the people of Laos are sustainable. When they do live on their own, they're actually able to live in harmony with nature to make sure that there's always going to be those natural resources for today's policies, but for future generations, because they know if they overfish, if they unfortunately do the practice that's been going on now of deforestation, we're in a time where the rest of the world is planting trees. We realize that the trees are a natural sink for carbon. And what's happening today, as was brought up by the previous speaker, is that unfortunately, there's more massive deforestation and monocropping that only exacerbates the economic challenges and does not allow the people to be able to survive. Then if you get into the issue of climate action, we'll be planning to go to Glasgow in November because the world will have another process similar to the one we're looking at today, the voluntary national review that Alliance for Democracy in Laos participated in July. There'll be something known as the Nationally Determined Contributions, NDC. And based on your initial research you've shared with us today at the Human Rights Council, then what will take place and what will happen will show that we are not on track for the 1.5 degrees to stay alive. And that we must then make sure every country, and Laos is at the heart of ASEAN and is very important. So we must make sure that Laos is moving towards carbon neutral, is working towards making sure that they can decarbonize their economy and be in line with the direction of the rest of the world. Then, of course, life below land, life on land, reinforcing what we just shared about forests is absolutely essential. But 16, Sustainable Development Goal 16, focusing on peace, focusing on justice, focusing on strong national institutions. This is why we need a Paris model of national human rights institution inside Laos to make sure that people can strive for accountability. We always see, unfortunately, the high level of corruption then only increases the inequality in the country. And unfortunately, actually gets rid of those important resources that are so vital and important going forward. And 17 is partnership. And that's what many of you are sharing today. On a preferred future for Laos that is based on the will of the people, that makes sure that everyone has a role to realize human rights in their own lives, but also for one another, that solidarity and sustainability are so important as we move forward into the future. So I once again want to thank all of you, and then be able to hand it over now to our final speaker.
Hello, Jesua?
Yep.
I think Miss Khamphene, she has technical problem.
Okay.
I can tell something about SDG 3, 4, and 5.
Sure, go ahead. We're just trying to keep to the schedule. We know it's during the lunch break for the delegates in Geneva, and we will then hand it to you, Bounthhom, for looking at those important SDGs and wrapping up our program today.
Yes, thank you, Joshua. Again, I speak now for Miss Khamphene Souvannasane, we have to, sorry, she has technical problem. I would like to speak about SDG 3, 4, and 5 with human rights violation in Laos now. I have now some presentation for you. Education problem in Laos now. You know, in Laos, corruption is in every level of administration. The children didn't have enough school. And you can see here, this school is around 15% in Laos, in district, sometimes in city too. And now we have in Laos around 9,000 teachers, they don't have employment. They work around 5 to 4 years, but the Lao government don't give some employment for this teacher. This is big problem in Laos now. Lao PDR, the government have many aids from international, but they don't take to the school or to the education system in Laos. Everything is in corruption in Laos. The next one is problem with the health system in Laos. I have some slide for you now. Health system in Laos is the same like education system. It's everything different from corruption in Laos in every level of administration. You can see this hospital in some district, in some city. You can see here, hospital don't have enough place for the people. And now we have problem with pandemic, COVID-19. The Lao people, they are poor enough. They don't have money to pay. But the Lao PDR government and power people in Lao PDR, they have everything to pay. They go to foreign, like to Thailand. They have enough to hospital to pay. But the Lao people, around 84% are very poor in Laos now. You can see how can the people live in Laos now. You can see the problem, the people, they don't have right to speak something. You can't speak about some critique of the government. The Lao people don't have right to live. The Lao people need help from internationals to enough to pressure of the Lao PDR government to change Laos to democratic system. Thank you, Justin.
Thank you so much, Bounthone. And that draws us to the conclusion of our side event at the 48th session of the Human Rights Council. There are a couple important developments I would like to share before we conclude that very much relate to our theme that we're discussing today. The first one is a resolution has been tabled that will be global recognition of the right to a safe, clean, healthy, and sustainable environment. This will be very important language for the people in Laos to challenge the current conditions that you've shared with us in Geneva today. The other important point that's absolutely essential is the potential for a new UN special procedure. We know we've partnered in the past with important special procedures, there is the potential for a new special rapporteur on climate change and human rights to be created, adding to the 44 thematic special procedures of the Human Rights Council. We know those are the eyes and the ears of the people that will then go and share what is truly happening regarding the climate crisis. So those are two developments that will take place between now and October 8th. And we should definitely make sure that we follow those closely, because those will be new tools that we can utilize to help ensure the sustainable development goals can be realized inside Laos. Of course, most of those look at really the important ones that you were talking about of climate action. And we also know this is just the beginning of our work in climate action, as November will be that very important Glasgow UN Framework Convention on Climate Change Conference of Parties 26. And that's also a chance to make sure when the world is describing how we're doing with those NDCs I discussed earlier, that we can then make sure that the voice of the people is heard in that process. And what we can do is actually do a genuine inventory about what is happening and how important it is. I want to thank all of you for being here today and sharing with us the latest information from the ground. We know that the Human Rights Council thrives on such research, and more importantly, such recommendations provided from the ground by the people, so that they better understand how to apply the global standards of human rights, sustainable development, and climate justice. Thank you all very much for participating, and we look forward to seeing you next week in New York City at the 6th Annual UN Sustainable Development Goals and Global Human Rights Conference. We know 2 years ago, we were all there in New York sharing the latest situation and making sure that people were aware of what was happening on inside Laos, and making sure that the world, when they gather there, the heads of state, which of course will start next week on Tuesday, on the International Day of Peace, that's when the heads of state will begin giving their speeches, that whenever the leaders of Laos would appear, that of course there would be people protesting, but more importantly, demanding reasonable recommendations to realize rights for all people inside Laos. So we thank you for your participation, and we look forward to connecting next week. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Thank
Dr.
you.
Cooper.
Thank you,
Bye.
somebody.
Sawadee.
welcome.
With pleasure.
Welcome, Dr. Cooper. Have a good day. From Canada.